Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Triumph Beyond Trauma. I'm so grateful that you're here, whether you are out on a walk or a run, you're in the gym, cleaning your house, or commuting to and from work. Thank you. It's so great that you could tune in and be here with me today. A bit of Tactical Yoga Australia news first. We are launching in June, and to celebrate, I will be hosting a 3-day tactical mind body mastery. If you have heard about my program, the First Responder Mental Wellness Method, you might have even had a look on the website, but you're still not sure if it's for you, sign up to join me for 3 days during launch week, where I'll be showing you how the mind, body, and breath can help you to rapidly reduce stress, create calm, help you to smile, and to be the version of yourself that you are the most happiest with. The 3 sessions will be about 45 minutes each, and each day we will focus on a different component. I'm so thrilled to be able to bring this to you live online. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that I won't be offended at all if you want to turn up and have your camera off. I know that joining a workshop event like this can feel a little daunting and can induce a little bit of anxiety, and I don't want that for you. I want everyone to get the absolute most out of it. If this floats your boat, please head over to tacticalyogaaustralia.com/mindbody and sign up so you can get all the details and links to join. I cannot wait to see you there. If you want to know a little more about the First Responder Mental Wellness Method, my program that's specifically curated for first responders, veterans, and frontline workers, you can check out episode 4 in season 1 of this podcast, or head over to the website tacticalyogaaustralia.com and you will see it all there. Links for the First Responder Mental Wellness Method and the Mind Body Mastery will be in the show notes. Now, on to this week's episode. This one is my very first expert guest. I am thrilled to bring Richmond Heath on to talk about TRE, which is trauma release exercises or tension and trauma release. I have to mention that my police brain is still pretty active and I like to gather a little bit of evidence and see things clearly for myself. So I've been practicing TRE for a few weeks now and the results have been pretty amazing. I talk about the few things that I've personally noticed during the show, and I'm so excited and I cannot wait to get chatting. So as I mentioned, my guest today is Richmond Heath. Richmond is the founder of TRE Australia and a physiotherapist who has been driving innovation in the health sector for more than 30 years. With a background in mental health and youth suicide prevention, he is passionate about empowering people in the self-management of their own health and well-being. Since introducing TRE to Australia and New Zealand in 2010, he has personally trained more than 5,000 people in the use of TRE and in 2021 established the world's first free online TRE course with more than 10,000 enrollments since its launch during the COVID pandemic. I cannot wait to get started, so let's hook in. Welcome to Triumph Beyond Trauma, the podcast that explores journeys of resilience and hope. I'm Rosie Skeen, a yoga and breathwork teacher and founder of Tactical Yoga Australia. As a former soldier's wife, mum to 3 beautiful kids and a medically retired New South Wales police officer with PTSD, I understand the challenges of navigating mental health in the first responder and veteran community. Join us for incredible stories from individuals who've confronted the depths of mental illness and discovered their path to happiness and purpose, as well as solo episodes and expert discussions. Together, we'll uncover the tools to help you navigate your journey toward a brighter, more fulfilling life. Whether you're looking for helpful insights, practical tips, or just a friendly reminder that you're not alone, Triumph Beyond Trauma has got your back. You matter, and your journey to a happier, more meaningful life starts right here. Welcome to the podcast, Richmond. It's so great to have you here.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Absolutely. You are a little bit of a different guest to what I normally have, being that you're not a first responder or veteran. I really love what you're going to say today, and I can't wait to get stuck into the conversation. I would like to know, though, a little bit about your history and how you've come to be where you are today.
Yeah. So I did physiotherapy straight after university, but then got to sort of my 30s or my early 30s. And what I found was that my body was starting to break down. So I'd played a heap of sport. I'd always used exercise to maintain my mental health. Played high level football, cricket, that sort of thing. But in my late 20s and then my 30s, as I say, I started to get all this chronic pain and injury. So My shoulders were so painful I couldn't swim anymore, so I couldn't do triathlons. And then my Achilles tendons were going, so I couldn't run anymore. And I had number of periods of chronic back pain where I had, sciatic pain down my leg, to the point at one stage where I couldn't even go up and down stairs because my leg, the neural pain from my leg was making it so weak that I couldn't go up and down stairs. And so because my body was breaking down, I remember speaking to one of my brothers and saying, I can't do all the things I used to do to keep myself happy. So really what happened was my body, for want of a better word, kind of ground me down to the point of going, I couldn't just keep functioning the way I did. So I needed to find other ways of recovering and maintaining my well-being. So I looked at mindfulness and meditation and a whole range of different things. And at one of the meditation courses, I was doing a 10-day silent meditation. My body started to slowly move. And it's not uncommon people find that when they're doing mindfulness. And so I just followed that and allowed my body to do it because I wasn't creating it. It was quite fascinating. And over a couple of days went from not being able to lift my arms above my shoulder to being able to do like a handstand and body press my whole weight.
Wow.
So this incredible shift or change. Now, at the time, I didn't have any understanding about what was happening and why was my body moving. And so then it was many, many years later when I got introduced to TRE that I had a sort of trauma-informed model of this sort of spontaneous movement reflex, whether it's shaking or trembling or spontaneous movements, and making sense of that and going, why does this feel so good? Why am I feeling so much more relaxed? Why is this so helpful? And through starting to understand the way stress and trauma it plays out in the body was only after going on a real paradigm shift out of the mechanical model of the body, looking at trauma, that then I became aware that I was someone who'd been living with high functioning anxiety, my whole life. So I was doing at school, I was almost dux of the school. I was captain of the cricket. I was doing this great course. I was functioning, but I also had this sense somewhere deeper inside that I was often just ignoring of I'm grinding down. I can't keep this up. And my body was really showing me that, but I was ignoring it. So it was only when I started to understand like, oh, right, all these tension, all these pain patterns are coming out of, unresolved stress, trauma, and anxiety that then I finally started to understand, right, this is kind of who I am and how I am. And while I'm not a first responder, I relate to that experience of the burnout experience where you're constantly functioning beyond your capacity. And for a lot of first responders, their capacity is extreme and elite, and mine would never be at that level. But what's relevant for all of us is when we're constantly operating beyond our capacity, whether we've got low capacity or high capacity. And that's what really leads us to burnout. And so that's sort of where I came to about 12, 15 years ago. I got introduced to TRE, which has really been a life-changing experience. And I've been dedicating the rest of my life to sharing this simple and amazing tool with people.
Yeah. Wow. So for our listeners, I would love for you to describe to them what TRE is and what it involves.
Yeah, so look, TRE originally stood for trauma release exercises. Now it gets called tension and trauma release, or sometimes I call it core release exercises. And what it involves is deliberately invoking spontaneous involuntary shaking and trembling and movement in the body. Now, most or all first responders, I can guarantee you, will have either experienced this shaking and trembling after a stressful event or critical incident, or if not, you will have seen it in other people that you're working with, or even in your dogs in a thunderstorm or something like that. So the key thing which I found so liberating is in our Western medical model, we've never researched this shaking and trembling after stress or trauma. So it's just always been both medically and culturally assumed to be a symptom of being anxious or nervous or having post-traumatic stress or being in shock. You come across something's happened, critical incident, someone's shaking, oh, they're in shock. We've got to calm that down. And what we're doing with TRE is we're actually working deliberately with the shaking reflex because it's not a part of shock. It's not a part of trauma. It's very simple to work that out. If you're standing somewhere after a car accident and my body's shaking, it's obvious that's not helping my body to fight or to flee.
Mm.
If I'm in a trauma shock immobility state where the body's trying to immobilize and shut down, it's also not doing that either. It's still shaking and vibrating. So the shaking and trembling is not a part of stress or trauma or anxiety or PTSD. It's not a symptom of, it's not the body doing that. It's the way our body recovers from that. So the classic example is someone who says, I'm having a panic attack. My body starts to shake and tremble. And I will always say to them, no, you're not having a panic attack. You're having a panic discharge. And that's very, very different. It does mean, yes, you've just had an experience of panic. The body's flooded with adrenaline and cortisol, but that shaking and trembling has nothing to do with creating anxiety or a flight response, has nothing to do with shock or creating an immobility response. It's a natural homeostatic reflex to dump the adrenaline, to use it up, to calm our nervous system so that physiologically the body gets back to a calm and relaxed place. So with that reframing, which is critical because in Western culture, but especially in first responder culture, we've all been told it's a sign of anxiety or you're losing control or you're in shock and it's PTSD. So of course it's stigmatized as something that's really bad and negative, and we must contain it and shut it down
Yeah.
and suppress it. Now, that's a really valuable skill. If you're at the scene of an accident and it's overwhelming, we do not want you to be in your own personal process and overcome with grief and shaking and trembling so you can't do your job. Or if you're on the battlefield, we need you to be able to disconnect from what's happening internally and contain all of that response. It's like the hardening up. That's what happens. Our body braces and holds that. But what we miss is teaching people how to soften down afterwards, so that when you get away from that critical incident or before you go home after a stressful day, you can actually let your body shake and tremble and naturally let go of all those physical components of the stress and trauma response. So it's really about the shaking and trembling is the completion of the stress or trauma cycle. So we're designed to shut it down and contain it so we can deal with the incident in the moment, disconnect from what's happening in ourselves. But that's where we get stuck. And because that process of stress and trauma is not a conscious process, no one's choosing to, I'm going to release some adrenaline. I'm going to tighten up in my shoulders. I'm going to brace in my abdominals. My breath's going to get shorter and held. That's not a conscious process. And the recovery from that is also similarly, can't say that word, but it's the same, as in it's not a conscious process.
Yeah.
So that's where the shaking and trembling, for your listeners, if the one thing you take away is that when you're shaking and trembling after a stressful or traumatic event, that's a positive recovery response. It's showing you that your body is telling you it's over and it's time to recover. It's time for the body to let go of the neurochemicals and the neuromuscular tension and bracing and patterns that basically leads to chronic burnout and to PTSD. So with TRE, what we do is we provide that trauma-informed reframing that this is a positive recovery response. And then the beauty is we teach you how you can access and invoke this shaking and tremoring response in a safe and controlled way in as little as 1 to 2 minutes. So what it means is that whenever you want to and wherever you want to, you can deliberately invoke this recovery response so your body shifts into parasympathetic recovery mode. It down-regulates, it discharges, or often we use the term like it's decompressing. Decompressing, or I also like to use the term debriefing the body. So sure, that's why people are like, I don't want to keep talking about all the time because it's not making a difference. I'm still feeling this. I know that happened back there and it's not happening now, but my body is still responding this way. And that's where by bypassing the conscious or cognitive mind, we're able to let the body address and release stress and trauma at the level at which it's created and generated, that then leads to the ongoing problems with post-traumatic stress and burnout.
Yeah, it's amazing. And it, makes complete sense. Of a few books that I've read, Bessel van der Kolk's The Body Keeps the Score, and he discusses how the body holds the trauma. And this is another reason why I found this so interesting, is that you're actually invoking your body's response and what it naturally wants to do to help you recover from the trauma. And it is so fast. Like it can invoke it really quickly, which is what I found was amazing when I was doing it last week and again this week, is that it can happen so fast and you can put your body into that position. Like breath work, I really enjoy that because you can do it wherever you want, whenever you want. And it's very quick and very easy and anybody can do it. And it's the same with TRE, is that the accessibility is there. And it's something that, first responders and veterans and anyone who's been through any trauma can can access. And I just think that's so amazing.
Mm. Yeah, and look, all around the world, like in Australia, we're like the slowest to take up TRE because of our Western medical model and the split between mental health, so our psychologists and psychiatrists don't really deal with movement or the muscles or the body. So we're well behind. And all around the world, there are, defense personnel, US military, first responders, police in lots of different countries who are using this technique. And one of the reasons they love it, as you say, is it's so simple and so quick and efficient. But it doesn't require any mental focus. So that's the first thing is at the end of your day, when you've been switched on and focused for 10 hours or even longer, the last thing most people want to do is go, I'm going to now focus and meditate and be mindful, even though that's really valuable if you do. The second thing is it doesn't take any physical effort because once the spontaneous movement, the shaking or the trembling is generated, it's not a movement you have to do. So when you're most fatigued, again, if you've been fighting that fire for 3 shifts back to back, you don't have the energy to go to the gym and pump weights and do that, which is going to be useful. So the fact that you can lie on the floor or on the ground or lying in bed at night to help you switch off and get to sleep, that makes it, again, super efficient and easy when people are most stressed and most fatigued. And then the last element, which people love probably even more, is because we're just dealing with the physiology of the body, it means that you don't have to think about, recall, or talk about whatever it is that's been bothering you. Now, that doesn't discount the value of being able to chat to people and debrief and do all that sort of stuff at all. But what it means is you don't always have to do that. And often it's that body-based component, the tight shoulders, the tension that eventually catches up with us and becomes physical injuries. It's that body-based component that we can't address consciously or cognitively or through CBT, because if we could, we'd all just choose to let it go.
Yeah.
So the beauty of accessing this natural recovery reflex that's kind of below our level of conscious control is it's working in the same way that the body is creating those stress and trauma responses. And so literally we have the terms, you can lie down and shake it off. So because it's so easy to use, because you don't have to talk about it, doesn't take energy, it means it's incredibly accessible when you're most fatigued, when you most need to recover and debrief your body, but you're least likely to do it because you don't have the mental or physical effort to do so. And around the world, people do it either on their own, and a lot of first responders use it. They lie in bed, bring their knees up, get the tremoring going. It helps switch their nervous system off, their mind calms down, and it helps them get to sleep and have a deeper sleep. But at the other end of the spectrum, people also use this tremoring in groups. So people might be out beyond the wire and come back to base, and they're lying down just as a group instead of just sitting around and chatting. They could still be chatting and talking because you don't have to be mindful or meditate to do it. But at the same time, they're letting their body shake and tremble. So it's just a way of resetting the nervous system, the neuromuscular system, and it's a natural part of every single person. Most mammals will naturally shake and tremble, but we've just misunderstood it, stigmatized it, suppressed it, medicated against it. So we're missing out on this natural recovery response that's already inside every one of us.
Yeah. Yeah. And just when you touched on there, like medicate against that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, there will be listeners here who will have been to a psychologist or their doctor and they'll say, oh, I'm starting to get the shakes when I do this. And they'll go, tick, that's a symptom of general anxiety disorder or PTSD. And maybe we need to medicate it. So inadvertently, by seeing it and misunderstanding it as a symptom, by medicating it, we're actually stopping the body from activating this very specific recovery response it's trying to activate.
Yeah.
So, another example where we sort of misunderstand is when people are having flashbacks and nightmares from things. So we tend to just go, look, that's purely a symptom. We've got to get rid of them. We go, yeah, we don't want you to be living with flashbacks and nightmares. But when we understand that those, especially during nightmares and dreams, the body is trying to reaccess, to reintegrate and discharge those memories or separate that memory from the body response, which is why we wake up with the pounding heart and the shaking that's happening.
Mm.
So yeah, it's like I described it a little bit like what we're doing with TRE is we're reopening the emergency exit, which in our culture, all of us have kind of suppressed from a very young age, from when you're at school and you start reading, and if your hands are shaking,
Mm.
We all think, oh my God, this is weakness, it's anxiety, it's nerves. And yes, it is showing us that we're nervous in that moment.
Mm.
If your hands are shaking after a critical incident, yes, it's showing you that you've had a big full rush of adrenaline. And the way the body uses adrenaline doesn't make you shake. It helps you move. The shaking is how your body uses up the adrenaline through this efficient recovery movement rather than having to act it out. So it's about recovering again. It's constantly about the shaking is the way out of the stress and trauma rather than a symptom. And when we suppress it, we get locked in because our body literally loses its ability to downregulate the nervous system. We've shut the door on letting the nervous system discharge and let it go.
Something that you touched on just briefly before, and like mentioning at the end of a shift, if you're fiery and you've been on the fire line for a couple of days, which happens, or, you're just exhausted after a shift on the street, and you can access these shakes or these movements in your body. Something else that I'm pretty sure, I hope I get this right, but a book that I've read by Peter Levine in an unspoken voice. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but there was a study that he mentioned in that book where if it was in an emergency department, do you know the one I'm talking about?
I do, yeah.
Yeah. So in it, for the listeners, I can't remember the doctor's name, but he worked in an emergency department, and he noticed that people's who had been through a traumatic incident and they had reduced their heart rate.
Yeah.
Yeah, they reduced their
That's right.
heart rate back to homeostasis,
Yep.
and their body and the parasympathetic nervous system had activated and their body had calmed down. The quicker that they could do that, and if they did it before discharge, the less likely they were to suffer PTSD from that particular incident. It's not to say that they would never, but that he
Yeah.
found that they were less likely to, and that's what Peter Levine was talking about as well. He was
Yeah.
involved in a car accident. He was able to use the breath to do that.
Yep.
So would you say that TRE has that same capability of bringing the body back into homeostasis? The parasympathetic nervous system takes over, and you're less likely to suffer from PTSD as a
Yeah.
result of that.
100%. Absolutely, 100%. And there's a couple of things here, Rosie. The first is that what's doing the work here is not TRE. TRE is just like a framework and a way of accessing this spontaneous recovery reflex. So if we take away TRE it's like we're saying, is the shaking and trembling, is that going to help us recover absolutely. That is the whole point of it. It's evolved in mammals. That's why we see dogs shaking it during a thunderstorm because they're anxious. Or even if you see ducks on the river fighting and then afterwards they'll flap their wings, or maybe you see someone who's a horse rider and if there's a fall, the horse will tremor and tremble. So the actual shaking and tremoring, that is our human body's innate recovery response. And TRE is just one way and model of making sense of it in a Western neuroscientific model, because there are lots of cultures around the world that have used it. And one of the most relevant example is the ancient samurai warriors. So when we think about the samurai, they're like lethal warriors one moment, but chilled out Zen masters the next with superhuman physical capacity. They practiced a secret martial art called Seiki Jutsu, which basically got them to meditate to the point where their body would start to spontaneously move and relax. So they're going, right, part of our secret to being able to be warriors, but to be able to be soft and recover when we need to as well, was this spontaneous movement reflex. So that's innate inside of us. And as I say, there's many, many ways of accessing it. And for me, TRE is just the easiest and most simple way of doing it and making sense. So that is just the reality. And as I say, all first responders will have experienced shaking and trembling. They will have seen it in others, but I can guarantee you 99% of them will have tried to stop it and suppress it and shut it down, simply because we've never been told what it actually is. It's never been framed as this recovery response and actually going, hey, you're shaking. That's fantastic. Jump into it. That's going to help you downregulate. And yeah, that study, Arya Shalev was his name.
It was.
This is really critical, okay, because in our Western world, we have a much more psychological based model of post-traumatic stress. And I always like to point out to people is when you say you've got PTSD, you've got unresolved trauma, what is it that you've actually got? What is it? People are like, oh, it's this thing that's inside me. I've got this condition. And I like to explain to people that when we think about I've got anxiety or I've got post-traumatic stress, PTSD is a verb. And what I mean by that is that what we think of as symptoms are showing us that in that moment, our body is reactivating our defensive responses, even though in this moment it may not necessarily be required or relevant. So the example is if you've been bitten by a black dog as a child and you've got this unresolved trauma about black dogs, someone brings you in a fluffy white puppy that's only 5 days old. Now, there's no danger, but my body is reacting and it's freaking out and I'm getting, quote, anxious. Really, what's happening is my body is saying, we need to flee. So there's an active immobilization component that's happening. My body in that moment is responding still as if this is dangerous. And so what we're really saying with post-traumatic stress, and it's the same for burnout, is that my body is still activated, my nervous system is still upregulated, which is a skill to meet a challenge, but it's still actively being initiated, this response in this current moment, even though that accident's finished, that bushfire's finished, I'm on the way home, I'm at home, I'm in bed. And so this is where the capacity to switch off that nervous system response is the critical thing. Because as I say, everyone says, I know that that incident happened and it's not still happening. I know that that black dog in my past bit me. It's not here. This is a fluffy white puppy. So intellectually, we all know that I shouldn't be stressed, but it's this body-based response that's outside our conscious control. And that's why by using this spontaneous movement outside our kind of, not so much outside our control, we can stop it. But moving this response is working at the same level. And that's the studies showing if you can get your physiology, and I don't just mean your conscious breath or your consciously calming down heart rate, but if your actual nervous system in your body has resolved and come fully out of that defensive response in that moment, then yeah, you're highly unlikely to get PTSD. And in fact, you're going to build resilience. And this is a real this is a fascinating thing because when we think about resilience, we think a lot about mindset. We think about what we're doing and doing our exercise. But if we look at resilience in the nervous system, the most healthy and the most resilient nervous system actually has the biggest, strongest stress response. So there's it's a complicated book to read, Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. But there's research in there. I don't recommend you read it unless you're really into the science of it. But what they show is that the animals that have the most resilience, it's not that they're the most calm, they have the quickest and the biggest and the strongest response to stresses. So basically what it means they get flushed with more adrenaline, they have more strength, they access more of their capacity in the moment, but then they're able to switch it off and get back to calm and relaxed. And each time we do that cycle, we actually train our body's ability to respond and upregulate to meet a stressor, potentially, so a lot of adrenaline, and then also its capacity to keep producing cortisol so we can maintain that effort for a long period of time. But the piece we miss especially in our Western sort of medical model and frontline work is the capacity to then say, right, now that that's happened, we are going to downregulate the body, let it calm all the way back down, actually beyond our baseline levels. And this is what I find really exciting is, yes, we talk about shaking and tremoring for critical incident recovery or even sports recovery. But when we actually complete this cycle, we start to grow neurophysiological resilience is the word I like to use. So what it means is we don't just shake back to where I was today before I got stressed. This reflex, when we activate it, will continue to find and unwind deeper layers of tension and bracing that we're not even aware of yet. And so the more we use it, the more resilience we actually build, not just in terms of how we think, but physiologically in our body's capacity to switch on and deal with a stressor or a threat or a trauma, but more importantly, its capacity to then switch off, because none of us ever lose the capacity to switch on. If we're sitting here and we hear a bomb or a car backfire or a child scream on the road, every single one of us, whether you're a first responder or not, your nervous system's going to go up to 500 kilometers an hour. So we have that superhuman response. But what we all lose is the capacity to go, oh, okay, it was a car backfiring. Oh, the child's been pulled off the road. It's safe. How do we get the nervous system from 500 kilometers an hour back to 0 kilometers an hour? And that's especially difficult when trained hypervigilance is a critical part of your job, especially for, police, where you need to be permanently switched on for so much of your shift. So training your ability to switch on and be hypervigilant more than calm and relaxed because there's potential for danger, that's a critical skill. But what people aren't being trained is say, okay, how do we get that hypervigilance back off? And again, if people could do it consciously, then everyone would be taught that at the academy and we'd have no PTSD and no burnout. But we're limited because we don't have conscious control over those stress and trauma responses. And that's where the tremoring below the level of conscious control offers people just this extraordinarily different and significant and profound way of accessing the nervous system and literally training the body how to switch off and relax and let go.
Yeah, and like you said, so important for first responders and veterans because you are trained to be hypervigilant, and after any number of years, it's really hard to turn that off. And without even knowing it, you are hypervigilant all the time, And I didn't notice it about myself, and I actually thought that I was doing pretty good for a while there. I'd read the books, and I'm like, okay, I know what to look out for, but sometimes it can be really sneaky. And it wasn't until, I couldn't go to the local shopping center anymore,
Mm,
you know, that I was like, okay, well, there's something going on here. Why am I looking at every single person walking past me as if they're a threat? And it's because I never addressed it, because I never addressed that hypervigilance and I never took any conscious effort to bring down from where I was at just such a high level of
mm,
hypervigilance to keep my physical body and my partner's body safe on the
yeah.
street. And then at home, you need to learn how to turn that off. And I started doing that with breath work. And what I think about mental health recovery or treatment is that you can use so many different things. And a lot of people don't realize that you can be in control of your journey. And by doing TRE as an option, or breath work, or yoga, or seeing a psychologist, or taking medication, like there's all these different things that are available to you to use. And I just think that's so important for people to know that you can pick and choose things that work for you. And if they don't work, then you try something else. Like I said before, the thing I really like about TRE is the accessibility that it can have, like people can have to it. And I think that's amazing.
Yeah.
Something else that, sorry, I just want to add one thing
Yeah,
and
you're
I'll let you go. Something else that first responders really struggle with is sleep. And
yeah.
I know that this is something that can help with sleep as well. And it's not just before bed, but even if you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning from an average dream
Mm.
or nightmare, it can be used then. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And sleep is probably one of the most commonly reported and well-liked benefits from first responders and veterans and defense personnel. Because the paradox about sleep is you can't make yourself sleep. We say you fall asleep. So it's a process of letting go and letting the nervous system slow down. And that's really what we're training. So absolutely. But again, first responders love it. And part of the reason I love it, traditionally TRE had all these exercises you had to do, but as you've experienced, you can lie down on the floor. I mean, you can do it lots of different ways, but the most simple is lying down on the floor. You lift your knees up. We use a little bit of muscle fatigue, just holding your knees up against gravity. And the more you train that, the easier it becomes. But you can be tremoring and shaking within 20 or 30 seconds. And then what it means is you can be tremoring in bed. You're letting your nervous system take over. You're letting your nervous system calm itself down. And of course, as your nervous system calms down, then the mind starts to slow down as well. Now, it doesn't mean that it's a magic bullet for everybody,
Hmm.
but certainly when I first started doing TRE, that was the thing I loved the most was I would some of the really racing mind, and then I would tremor and would just switch my mind off like that, and I'd just fall straight away into a massively deep sleep. So again, sleep and that ability to fall asleep, it's a skill that we can train. So being able to do it in bed is just makes it so simple and so easy. And I often say to people when they're going, "Oh, I'm really stressed, I'm really busy. When am I going to fit this in?" I'm like, "Do you fall asleep instantly every time you put your head on the pillow? And if you don't, just bring your knees up and start tremoring." And people love that because you can tremor, get to that point where the body's starting to slow down and relax. I'm like, "Great, roll over and go to sleep."
Yeah.
So yeah, sleep is absolutely one of the critical processes. And there are all those things of sleep hygiene and what you do and get off your phone for an hour before you're trying to go to bed. So there are all those things.
Mm.
But ultimately, at the end of the day, the limitation to falling asleep is our nervous system's ability to switch off and calm down because it's accessing the safety inside our own system. And it's learnt to go, yeah, I need to be vigilant here. I need to be switched on so I can perform. But now here, I need to be able to switch off. So it's that capacity to switch on and switch off that TRE is so, so valuable for. Can I come back to what you talked about with that vigilance and switching off?
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
this was something that I never really knew until a couple of years ago. So let's talk about burnout rather than PTSD, because it's just such a huge effort and why so many people end up sadly leaving the force or the department and not doing the careers that they love doing.
Yeah.
So most of us and the listeners, when you think about burnout, we go, oh my God, I've got low energy. I can't get out of bed. I'm getting low, right? That's the last stage or the last phase of burnout. And
Mm.
what most people don't realize is the first phase of burnout is a stage where you've got really high energy. And often you're performing at your peak, because in order to perform better than just your baseline level, you need to be pumped full of adrenaline and do that. But the first part of that is, so often people who are performing at really high levels, they're not feeling any tiredness, they're not noticing anything, that they're actually feeling really switched on. But the first sign is then you're going, I'm finding it hard to switch off. I've got no issues with low fatigue. I don't have any burnout symptoms. I'm not tired. I'm not lethargic. I'm not feeling depressed. I'm actually really pumped up. In fact, when I go home, normal life is really boring. In fact, I need to keep staying pumped up because that's become my baseline.
Yes.
Or it can be, you know what? I need to go and have 5 beers at the pub with my mates to be able to calm down because I'm so switched on. Or whatever it might be, I need to go home and numb out on Facebook or watch TV, whatever it might be. Or maybe I need to do 2 hours of gym work to get to that point where I'm physically relaxed. So for your listeners, what I encourage you to think about is, how is your capacity to switch off? Because if you're having any difficulty switching off, you're effectively in phase 1 burnout. You don't have symptoms of low energy. You've got symptoms of excessive chronic high energy or high arousal that you can't switch off, which is the first phase. So you've already got burnout. You're just not aware of it because we're not experiencing the fatigue. And that's where, if we can get in early rather than trying to use TRE for treatment of post-traumatic stress, which it has relevance for, to support and enhance everything else we're doing. But what I'm most passionate about, Rose, is going, I dream of the day when recruits at the academy will be taught this, and from day one, they will be able to use this to switch off in amongst all their other tools to use. They will be able to use it to build their resilience in their nervous system. And by that resilience, think about it. You bend an object and the resilience is a capacity to bounce back and not be damaged. So this is the missing component of resilience. We're not just saying, oh, don't be as affected by the work you're doing. We're saying, no, the work is going to affect you. When you're dealing with humans and vicarious trauma, it is going to affect you unless you numb out, disconnect from yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But resilience is that capacity to not just bounce back, but to switch off and go, that happened. I got moved out of shape. Now I can get back to my center and my stable, which is reflected by, I'm calm, I'm relaxed, I can pay attention, I can talk to the kids, I can play, whatever it is, I can enjoy whatever, is training that part. That's the key to the resilience that we're missing, is resilience in the nervous system. And you've got limited capacity to do that consciously without a lot of training. So, if you're a yogi and you've done years of breath work and that, well, then yes, you train your capacity like any other skill to go, I'm going to breathe a certain way and I'm going to calm right down. But it often takes a whole lot of training and practice. And even then, we're still limited to what we can consciously do, whereas the shaking and the trembling is able to release that tension or that arousal in the system at a level beyond what we can do consciously. So for me, it doesn't replace anything else that we're doing. It doesn't replace counseling or breathing or mindfulness or group debriefing. It doesn't replace any of that stuff. But when you add it together, it's like a turbocharger or a turbo boost that will actually increase the effectiveness of all that as well.
Yeah, that's so important. And I totally agree with you with the proactive approach to teaching people, especially recruits, it's like, when you want anything to change, you teach the kids first because they're going to grow up and they're going to do it all. So you teach the people when they're first joining before they've been exposed, hopefully, to any trauma,
Mm,
and teach them the skills that will help them in their career, because there's so many of us that have to leave a job that we actually really love doing because of the effect that it's had on our mind and body. So I
mm,
couldn't agree with you more that these techniques need to be taught at those very first stages as much as anything else.
mm.
Something that I noticed I have, and I'm sure it's related to my trauma, is some psoas muscle issues. And since I've done a couple of sessions of TRE, I actually haven't noticed that pain. Can you speak on that a little bit?
Yeah, so first of all, good for you. That's
Oh, it's great.
fantastic. So, that's great. And on some level you go, wow, that's amazing. But
Mm,
on other levels, and having seen this happen so much, that's great. That's normal. That's what the body's supposed to do. So first of all, for people who don't know, the psoas muscle is kind of our deepest muscle in our pelvis and our hip and in our abdominals. It gets called the muscle of the soul sometimes. If you're a meat eater, it's the eye fillet, literally. So it's right in the deepest part of your abdominals, and it connects your thigh all the way up to the lower back. So whenever there's any kind of quick stress response, on some level, that muscle is going to contract because it's the muscle that folds the body over towards the fetal position. It can also get tight just from sitting chronically and all that sort of stuff. But a lot of us just have that chronic tension there. So in TRE, the way we tend to do it, lying on the back, and we get the muscles on the inside of the groin and the thigh tremoring, links directly into that psoas muscle. So what we're saying, or what you're seeing here, is going, yeah, I've got these issues with my psoas muscle. So this is again why I say, PTSD and stress is a verb. The issue with that psoas muscle is it's tight. What's
yeah.
that mean? It's activated even though you're lying down and you want it to relax. It's not switching off. It's hypervigilant, for want of a better word. So on a muscular level, we're going, right, that muscle is contracted and tight. It doesn't know how to go from tight back to soft and floppy. And when you start understanding, again, the muscles are so simple to work with, that is the chronic, it's bracing, it's holding. Now, at a muscular level, that psoas muscle, or one on either side, they're chronically braced and held tense. On a global level, it's like the way our whole body and our nervous system can be chronically braced and held and tense. Literally, it's like bracing for impact. So there's tension. The shoulders start to get tighter and held tight. The diaphragm, we lose the ability to breathe or laugh. So on a micromuscular level, what's happening is the body, that muscle saying, I know how to contract, I know how to brace, I know how to protect myself. And on the macro level, that's like saying, I know how to go to work, I know how to be hypervigilant, I know how to protect myself. But then you come home and that muscle's saying, oh, I don't know how to get soft and relaxed and lengthen out and soften again, or to move in a calm, relaxed way. I only know how to move in this hypertense way.
Yeah.
And so that shaking or the trembling is the way the body goes, I hold on, I relax, I hold on, I relax, I hold on. It contracts and relaxes, it contracts and relaxes. And that is how the body repatterns the neuromuscular system to say, yep, we were tight, now we want to soften down. Oh, no, we want to tighten up again, soften down, soft tight. And then eventually it literally trembles or tremors its way back to going, we can be soft and calm and relaxed. We can switch this muscle off because we don't need it at the moment while you're lying on your back. In the same way, you can go, I'm not at work now. We can let the nervous system switch off. And again, that's really what we're deliberately invoking with TRE, because the shaking and trembling is a natural response. We're designed that this will happen spontaneously. Again, the problem for us is in our culture. When it happens, then we're going, oh my God, PTSD. Now things are bad, rather than going, we should be shaking and trembling on a regular basis, both spontaneously, if you're having traumatic critical incidents at work regularly,
Mm.
or even if you're coming across people you've got vicarious trauma. Vicarious trauma, our body's still responding the same way. So it's about, how do we help the body let that go and come out of that protective position? So on your psoas muscle, that one individual muscle, we're going, yeah, it's just learning how to relax again. And it's not because of something you've consciously done. You're not
Oh,
saying muscle relax, because that muscle's contracting outside your control. But the trembling and the shaking is effectively that muscle saying, okay, it's okay. I can let go again and I can let it go. And then you go, right, muscles are a bit healthier. I'm feeling better. It's more relaxed. And then what tends to happen, Rosie, is what you find is as you keep tremoring, now that your psoas muscle's more relaxed, guess what will happen? Your body will find the next layer of tension. It might be your abdominals, it could be your shoulders. And when they start to move, then they relax.
Yeah.
And how over time, we're training the body to be more flexible and supple and variable, because ultimately, this is the thing in our culture, strength we think about as being really big and strong and tough and permanently activated muscles that are all bulging, which is a complete waste of energy because you've got all that energy being used to keep the muscles contracted. The healthiest muscles are muscles that can switch on and create the absolute most strength in that moment, but can then switch off and be completely soft and floppy at the same time. So when we look at the nervous system, that's the exact same thing. The healthiest first responders that are going to have the longest careers are the ones that can switch on and meet those challenges. They can fully activate all of their resources, all of their strength, their mind, their focus, all of that can switch them on and they can perform at levels that other people can't do because they're training themselves to do that.
Uh-huh.
The ones that are going to have, lengthy careers and enjoyable careers are the ones who then go, but you know what? I can now switch off and get completely back to calm. Maybe it's lying on the floor for 5 minutes before I leave the office so that when I get home to my family, I'm not pretending to be calm and carrying in a whole lot of stress and tension in my body and muscular tension, which my family and friends are all picking up on. Their nervous systems are all feeling that, even if I'm pretending to be calm or I'm containing it. And again, that's what most of us will find. We spend lives containing that, what we call stress and anxiety. But really what we're containing is the body's desire to move and shake off, literally shake off and move to calm ourselves back down. So this is why this process is not just relevant to first responders, it's relevant to what the state of your body is when you walk home to your family. And we want that to be as calm and relaxed as possible because inadvertently, family and friends start to pick up on that. Their own bodies start to tighten up and they learn, gee, mum and dad, when they come home, they're my adults. That's how the body has to be to feel safe in this world. My body's naturally as a child going to start to tighten up as well. So it goes beyond just your own well-being. The more physiologically calm and relaxed you can be in your body, not just psycho-emotionally, but physiologically, the better for those loved ones around you as well.
I couldn't agree more with that. I know personally when I'm in a state of not doing real well, it's contagious. Yeah, my husband will pick up on it. He's like, if I've got the shits and
Yeah.
he will. And then the kids are all like, you can see they're tense, the shoulders are up, they don't know what they're
Yep.
doing. And I know it's the same across a lot of families, especially first responders
Yeah.
who are dealing with a parent who is suffering a little bit or a lot, unfortunately. So the whole family does suffer. So I'm really glad that you made that point that you're not just doing things for yourself. And sometimes when I talk to friends or people that sometimes ask for my advice and they can feel like maybe they're being a bit selfish by taking a class or taking time out to do something that will eventually benefit them. And what I
Mm.
like to say to them is, well, take yourself out of the equation and who else do you need to care for? And who else will this benefit? And it's your family and your kids and your friends and anyone else that personally knows you outside of whatever work you're doing, regardless of what job it is, if you're a first responder or not. So
Mm.
it's so important that you do take the time to look after yourself because there's so many other people that will benefit from it.
That's right. And, we often forget no one wants first responders to sacrifice themselves. You know, Occasionally and sadly, there are situations where that happens, and that's a tragedy for everyone. But there's that slow burn sacrifice that so many first responders are doing. So none of us would say, yeah, I want you to contain all that stress and anxiety so that you can pretend to be calm around me and we can get along without anything being that you're not anxious or you're not angry.
Hmm.
No one wants that. Everyone is saying, no, we want you to be thriving, to be fully alive, to be doing that job and being able to switch off and calm down afterwards so that when you need to be, you switch on. When you need not to be, you can switch off. So I think it's important to keep that in mind that ultimately, yeah, sure, we have dependency and we've got kids and partners need help and all those sort of things. But really, the people who love us all want us to be really healthy and thriving on the inside, not just putting on that mask or that facade or your body armor, literally, and carrying it around all braced, which is eventually, if it's not leading to burnout and PTSD straight away, has a massive contribution to chronic disease in later life. It's not until people are 60 or 70 or 80 and they start getting chronic diseases that they start to understand, wow, this is because, not just because of what happened when I was younger or how I lived, but it's happening because my nervous system is chronically activated in a defensive state. People will understand this very simply is when you go into a fight or flight response or any stress response, the blood, just making it really simple, the blood's going to go to the periphery of the body, to the arms and the legs. Now it's going away from your digestive tract. It's going away from your bone marrow. It actually tends to come away from the hands and feet as well. So what it means is when we're in a sort of activated state, we're not regenerating bone. Our system's not digesting well. So we're getting all those complications that then lead to osteoporosis or contribute to osteoporosis or irritable bowel or potentially cancers and heart rate conditions and all that, because the body's been chronically living in this highly overactive defensive state. And there's a groundbreaking study called the ACE study that was looking at adverse childhood effects,
Wow.
which I don't know, many years ago, but it was really the first time that Western science started to say, gee, if you have these traumatic experiences when you're young, you're 10 times more likely to have heart disease or cancer when you're older. And again, it's not because, oh, if this happened, you will get this. It's because if this happened, and alluding to the study you spoke about earlier, if this happens and your body doesn't switch off and recover and get back to that finish, that black dog bit me, it was scary, I got the shakes, I trembled, I cried, and then my breath, and then my body had let it go.
Mm.
That point, that becomes a memory rather than something that the body's carrying in this present moment. So it's all about this sense of being able to uncouple or separate in the body what the experience was, or whether it was my 8-hour shift in trained hypervigilance in the car or on the truck, being able to come out of that state. That's the critical thing. Again, I keep saying the same thing, really. That's the critical thing that we're missing. And if doing it consciously worked, we wouldn't have any problems with PTSD and burnout, because for the last 10 or 15 years, there's been a huge influx of providing this sort of recovery and resilience training. But again, the different point about the neurogenic tremor or the TRE or that shaking response is it's working at a different level, but beyond our conscious mind. And that's a missing piece in sort of first responder training and recovery and wellbeing and mental health at the moment.
Oh, great. This is so, there's so much information, Richmond. Is there anything else that you would like to talk about in relation to TRE? Because then I'll ask you about, I know you're free training online. That's still, it's still free, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I'll get people to go and connect. So is there anything else that you'd like to add?
Yeah. So the other element that's important to note is, because we often tend to talk about shaking and trembling in trauma recovery or stress recovery, because that's where most of us experience it, but that people are aware that this is not just about a mental health or trauma recovery response. There are elite athletes in Australia and around the world that are using this tremor reflex purely for performance enhancement. And this is especially what I love. First responders were going, like if I said, look, you have to put a feather in your ear every night to get rid of your stress, they don't really care. But if you say, put a feather in your ear at the end of every night and you're going to do your job better, they're all like, right, give me the feather. I want to do, that's what we're focused on. So, there's AFL footballers, there's Olympic athletes, there's elite surfers, pro surfers, who are integrating this tremoring response into their daily routines, not because they're trying to prevent PTSD, but because they're saying, hey, I need to physiologically recover better, sleep better, so I can perform better. And as my nervous system gets more relaxed and more integrated, I can make decisions better under pressure. So just keeping in mind that while a lot of people think about, oh, this is about preventing, yeah, sure, it's about preventing, that it's got a huge upside and a performance enhancing value as well. And that's where, for me, yeah, I'm most passionate. is about people integrating it into their life. From this talk, if all you take away is, gee, I start trembling, my partner, my work colleague, someone I'm working with, some community member starts trembling, that's a positive thing. I need to support that and let it come to its full completion. So that's great. Other people might go, gee, wow, I want to learn how to do this TRE technique so that after that major traumatic incident where I'm feeling stressed and traumatized more than normal, I'm going to use it at will, at call. But for me, the real passion is going when people start to go, you know what? This is just part of my somatic hygiene or my neuromuscular hygiene. It's like brushing my teeth at night to keep my mouth clean. This is how I need to clean my nervous system and my muscular system so I can do my job. And it's better than just cleaning your teeth because it's going to build that resilience. So I encourage people to consider it, not just about this is all mental health, but actually going, this process will help you do your job better in the same way that AFL footballers are going, gee, I've got more flexibility, I've got more strength, I've got more dynamic core stability. This is helping me play and perform better. So that's where it's a real positive upside is for those people who are going, I'm not stressed, I'm not traumatized, I'm not burnt out, I don't have PTSD. Well, would you be even better than you already are? Will you continue to grow and evolve in your skills and your capacity and your physiological maturity by adding it in? Absolutely, you will. So it's really relevant for absolutely everybody.
If people wanted to do that and you could write a prescription, how often would they do it and for what period of time? It would be ideal.
Yeah. So look, it's very individual. Most people find that about 10, 15, 20 minutes of tremoring is normally enough. Some people might do a lot more. Some people might do a lot less. In an ideal world, I sort of go 3, 4, 5 times a week would be ideal, but a lot of people do it every single day. Some people only do it, once a week. Some people only do it when they're stressed. So it's about people finding where it fits into their own life. If you're someone who goes to the gym 3 times a week, I'd be like, great, just last 5 minutes in your gym session, go and lie down, do a bit of trembling, you'll find that you'll recover a lot better. If you're someone who's really hectic and you're going, I haven't got time to do a 20-minute tremor session in my day, I'll say, great, in bed at night, bring your knees up, do it when you go to sleep, or do it first thing in the morning. Or ideally, an ideal prescription for me would be at least once a week. But ideally, at the end of your shift, just go, you know what? The last 15 minutes of my shift are dedicated to getting my physiology back to a calm and relaxed state because with what we know about PTSD now, there is an ethical and a moral obligation that first responder agencies are training, not just training people how to recover and then sending them home and saying, look, we'll pay you while you're working. Recovery is part of the deal, but you've got to go home and do that in your own time.
Yes.
The ideal prescription is saying, no, recovery is part of being a first responder. This is a KPI. Probably the most important KPI is that you're not getting worse and getting traumatized and getting unhealthy. And so, my ideal prescription would be that agencies will start saying and taking this responsibly enough to the point where they'll say, we're not just going to give you the tools that you need to use in unpaid time, but actually we need to make sure you leave our door at the end of the day and you're back to okay or better than you were when you walked in. My dream vision would be that, again, last 15 minutes of the day would be, whether it's yoga, whether it's mindfulness, whether it's whatever it is, doesn't have to be tremoring and TRE, but having taught this for so many years, I know that a huge percentage of people would just do that because you're like, just lie down, tremor together. You can do it as a unit. You can talk, you can muck around. You don't have to be focused. You can be in your own space. That would be my ideal prescription so that when people are leaving home, they're not carrying the unresolved stress and trauma from their jobs and being expected to dedicate their own time and their own money to their recovery. AFL footballers in the old days, 30 years ago, you play footy, that's what they paid you for. Then you go out, get drunk, do whatever, turn up the next day. Whereas these days, no. You play your game, they take you back to the rooms, you do your ice bars. The recovery is built into it because that's how you optimize performance. And in my mind, the biggest thing that's enhancing performance over the last 10 or 15 years is the focus on recovery. In emergency services, in Australia at least, we're talking the talk about recovery. We're providing recovery tools, but people are not being paid to recover in their work time. And if we're serious about changing the devastating effects of service in all forms, it needs to get to the point where recovery is part of our paid work hours and a KPI.
I think something that's so important with that as well is changing the stigma in relation to seeking help, whether you're taking a proactive approach to it or something reactive. And like you said, first responder agencies especially are very good at saying, yeah, this is what you need. You should go do this. But don't, like you said, don't do it in our time. You need to sort yourself out in your own time. Reducing the stigma of seeking that help would work if they did it at work,
Mm.
because everyone can do it and there's no stigma attached to it. And so, like you say, at the changeover of a shift, the oncoming crew could do it with the outgoing crew. Everyone's doing it together. There's no stigma there. You don't feel like you're doing something that you shouldn't be doing, or that people are going to think less of you if the narrative changes because they're doing it together.
That's right. And the other classic example is critical incident debriefing, which has become a huge, big thing. And the research largely shows that it's not very effective.
No,
What I would suggest, though, is that if people were lying on the floor and tremoring during that
doing the
process
debrief.
and talking, because the missing thing is that when we talk about stuff, it's not necessarily being processed through the physiology of the body and released that way. So it's not that the debriefing is ineffective. It's just that if we're only talking about stuff and it's not being processed through and released from the body, then it's not going to do it. It's not going to have the benefits. So that's where, again, you can be in a group of people after a critical incident, lying on the floor, either in your own space tremoring. You can be talking to your friends. You can be talking about the football, or you can be talking about the incident and how you're going. Ultimately, the thing that we're missing out is we need to get to the point where you have that, that big breath,
Yeah.
and the nervous system or the body and the neuromuscular system have said, that's over. I don't need to stay in this highly activated, aroused or immobilized or braced or protective or vigilant state. That's finished. And when it's finished in the physiology of the body, like that research you mentioned, you're not going to get post-traumatic stress because it's over. You're going to remember it, but your body's not remembering it and keeping the score or bearing the burden, which is what all those kind of books are about. So,
Yeah.
you know, it's going to happen. The difficulty, sadly, for us in Australia is a lot of the people who are making the decisions about what is and isn't, what is and aren't done, or I don't know what I'm saying there, what is or is not done. Obviously, a lot of them are saying we need 20 years and 500 randomized controlled blind studies before we're going to even give this a try. To which I always say to people, if you give me 50 of your staff and let them evaluate this, I stopped doing evaluations of my workshops a long time ago because it was consistently the same results.
Yes.
95%, like I've got one open in front of me with frontline workers, social workers, Aboriginal health workers in New South Wales Health. At the end of a one-day training, 22 out of the 24 of them said this tremoring TRE training was more effective than any other vicarious trauma training they had done. Now, again, that's not to say that I'm not saying that to say that it's better. I'm just saying that to say when frontline workers and staff get the opportunity to experience this, they unanimously say this is as good, if not better, than other stuff I've been trained. They unanimously say all the other staff in my organization should be learning this sort of thing. So, my dream would be that organizations start doing a little pilot. So rather than saying, look, this guy's telling me it's really good, or I can't find enough research to say whether it's really good, we actually let the frontline workers themselves make the decision and say, hey, I want to do more of this. We want to do more of this or not. And at the moment, sadly, they're not being given access to it because the administrators and the health workers and the psychologists often are in that position making the call about what they try and don't try, and not yet understanding or able to basically say, look, let's give people access to this and see what they think of it. Because I can guarantee you, after teaching more than 5,000 people over the last 10 years and being one of thousands of people around the world teaching this technique to first responders all around the world, that the vast majority of people are going to say, this is invaluable. It's simple. It's easy. We all need to know it.
Well, let's take the organizations out of it. How can people access TRE for themselves and see if it's something that they would like to use?
Yeah, great. So during COVID, I was living in, or I'm still in Melbourne, the world's most locked down city. And so I couldn't travel or do work and trainings and that. So I was on JobKeeper, and I created a free online course for people to learn TRE. And to find it, you just go to treaustralia.com. And in that course, it's got 3 sessions of guided sessions so you learn the tremoring, but it's also got some theory and some practical advice about how to, because one of the things is learning how to regulate the tremoring so that while your body's shaking and tremoring, you're going, this isn't weird. I don't feel, this feels comfortable. I can stop and start it as I would like. So over the 3 sessions, you do a tremor, see how you sleep, see how you go, and then come back. So most people will find that at the end of that 3 sessions, they'll have the basics of what they need to know to be able to use it on an ongoing basis. If people have a major history of trauma or mental health or physical health conditions, there is a screening tool at the start of that course where if you have any concerns about doing it on your own for any reason, then you can link off and find TRE providers all around Australia or globally. And we don't have heaps. I think we've got about 100 around Australia. They're not all necessarily listed on the website, but you can also do TRE sessions very successfully via Zoom, and in terms of empowering you to start using it, because it's not so much a therapy where you're going, hey, you need to come and see me to do the sessions every week. Our job is really just to say, hey, look, this is how you get the tremors going on. This is how you regulate the tremors. This is how you integrate it into your life. And then if you've got questions, you can ask us. So yeah, my real passion is about empowering people with this, not saying, come and see me all the time in my clinic. It's going, no, this is already inside you and you can learn it. So that online course is just at treaustralia.com. There's a link on most of the pages so you can access it there.
Yeah, I'll link to it in the show notes too. And for anyone listening who is thinking, yeah, I think I'd like to try it, I implore you to do it because I've done it. The training's fantastic. I can't believe it's free. I think it's a bit crazy, but it's really great. I actually consciously wanted to monitor how I would sleep afterwards, and I had some of the best sleeps I've had for a little while actually after tremoring that day. And it's definitely something that I'm going to integrate into my wellness with my yoga and breath work and gym work and all the other things that I try and do to keep myself nice and healthy. And I'm so glad that you approached me and brought this to my attention because it's something that I really do believe, and I know you are very passionate about it, can help people, not only after the fact, but like you said, as a performance enhancement tool and a proactive measure to keep your mental health in check as well. So I really thank you so much for that. And I hope that some listeners take it on board and go and check it out.
Yeah, look, you're really welcome. I appreciate the chance to share it, Rosie. And the thing is, if people do have any difficulties with it, if you do that course or you get stuck, is please just reach out, make contact with a TRE provider, and they'll be able to help you so that you can get it working well for you.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks again. And thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate your time.
You're welcome.
I hope you've enjoyed today's episode. If you have, make sure to hit subscribe so you never miss any new ones. We release fresh content every Tuesday. And while you're there, take a moment to leave us a review. I would genuinely appreciate your thoughts. Don't forget to connect with me on Instagram and Facebook at Tactical Yoga Australia and share this episode with your friends, family and workmates to spread inspiration. Your support means the world. My name is Rosie Skeen. Join me again next week for another empowering and positive episode of Triumph Beyond Trauma. Until then, be kind to your mind and trust in the magic of your consistent and positive efforts. Triumph beyond your trauma is closer than you think. Have the best week.